Pray, sir, was you ever in Paris? He only bowed. And pray, sir, how did you like it? This comprehensive question, as Sir Clement would have called it, though it made him smile, also made him hesitate. However, his answer was expressive of his approbation. I thought you would like it, sir, because you look so like a gentleman. As to the Captain, and as to that other gentleman, why, they may very well not like what they don't know; for I suppose, sir, you was never abroad? Only 3 years, ma'am, answered Sir Clement drily. Well, that's very surprising. I should never have thought it. However, I dare say you only kept company with the English. Why, pray, who should he keep company with? cried the Captain. What, I suppose you'd have him ashamed of his own nation, like some other people not 1,000 miles off, on purpose to make his own nation ashamed of him? I'm sure it would be a very good thing if you'd go abroad yourself. How will you make that out, hey, madam? Come, please to tell me, where would be the good of that? Where? Why, a great deal. They'd make quite another person of you. What, I suppose you'd have me to learn to cut capers, and dress like a monkey, and palaver in French gibberish, hey, would you? And powder and daub, and make myself up like some other folks? I would have you learn to be more politer, sir, and not to talk to ladies in such a rude, old-fashioned way as this. You, sir, as have been in Paris," again addressing herself to Lord Orville, "can tell this English gentleman how he'd be despised, if he was to talk in such an ungenteel manner as this before any foreigners. Why, there isn't a hairdresser, nor a shoemaker, nor nobody, that wouldn't blush to be in your company." "Why, look ye, madam," answered the Captain, "as to your hair pinchers and shoe blacks, you may puff off their manners and welcome, and I am heartily glad you like 'em so well. But as to me, since you must needs make so free of your advice, I must e'en tell you I never kept company with any such gentry." "Come, ladies and gentlemen," said Mrs. Mirvan, "as many of you as have done tea, I invite you to walk with me." Maria and I started up instantly, Lord Orville followed, and I question whether we were not half round the room, ere the angry disputants knew that we had left the box. As the husband of Mrs. Mirvan had borne so large a share in the disagreeable altercation, Lord Orville forbore to make any comments upon it, so that the subject was immediately dropped, and the conversation became calmly sociable and politely cheerful, and to everybody but me must have been highly agreeable. But as to myself, I was so eagerly desirous of making some apology to Lord Orville, for the impertinence of which he must have thought me guilty at the ridotto, and yet so utterly unable to assume sufficient courage to speak to him, concerning an affair in which I had so terribly exposed myself, that I hardly ventured to say a word all the time we were walking. Besides, the knowledge of his contemptuous opinion haunted and dispirited me, and made me fear he might possibly misconstrue whatever I should say; so that, far from enjoying a conversation which might, at any other time, have delighted me, I continued silent, uncomfortable, and ashamed. Oh, sir, shall I ever again involve myself in so foolish an embarrassment? I'm sure that, if I do, I shall deserve greater mortification. We were not joined by the rest of the party till we had taken 3 or 4 turns about the room, and then they were so quarrelsome, that Mrs. Mirvan complained of being fatigued, and proposed going home. No one dissented. Lord Orville joined another party, having first made an offer of his services, which the gentleman declined, and we proceeded to an outward room, where we waited for the carriages. It was settled that we should return to town in the same manner we came to Ranelagh, and accordingly Monsieur Du Bois handed Madame Duval into a hackney coach, and was just preparing to follow her, when she screamed, and jumped hastily out, declaring she was wet through all her clothes. Indeed, upon examination, the coach was found to be in a dismal condition, for the weather proved very bad, and the rain had, though I know not how, made its way into the carriage. Mrs. and Miss Mirvan and myself were already disposed of as before; but no sooner did the Captain hear this account, than, without any ceremony, he was so civil as to immediately take possession of the vacant seat in his own coach, leaving Madame Duval and Monsieur Du Bois to take care of themselves. As to Sir Clement Willoughby, his own chariot was in waiting. I instantly begged permission to offer Madame Duval my own place, and made a motion to get out; but Mrs. Mirvan stopped me, saying that I should then be obliged to return to town with only the foreigner, or Sir Clement. "Oh, never mind the old beldam," cried the Captain, "she's weather-proof, I'll answer for her. and besides, as we all are, I hope, English, why she'll meet with no worse than she expects from us." "I do not mean to defend her," said Mrs. Mirvan, "but indeed, as she belongs to our party, we cannot with any decency leave the place till she is, by some means, accommodated." "Lord, my dear," cried the Captain, whom the distress of Madame Duval had put into a very good humour, "why, she'll break her heart if she meets with any civility from a filthy Englishman." Mrs. Mirvan, however, prevailed, and we all got out of the coach, to wait till Madame Duval could meet with some better carriage. We found her, attended by Monsieur Du Bois, standing amongst the servants, and very busy in wiping her negligee, and endeavouring to save it from being stained by the wet, as she said it was a new Lyons silk. Sir Clement Willoughby offered her the use of his chariot, but she had been too much piqued by his raillery to accept it. We waited some time, but in vain, for no hackney coach could be procured. The Captain at last was persuaded to accompany Sir Clement himself, and we four females were handed into Mrs. Mirvan's carriage, though not before Madame Duval had insisted upon our making room for Monsieur Du Bois, to which the Captain only consented in preference to being incommoded by him in Sir Clement's chariot. Our party drove off first. We were silent and unsociable, for the difficulties attending this arrangement had made every one languid and fatigued. Unsociable, I must own, we continued; but very short was the duration of our silence, as we had not proceeded 30 yards before every voice was heard at once, for the coach broke down. I suppose we concluded, of course, that we were all half killed, by the violent shrieks that seemed to come from every mouth. The chariot was stopped, the servants came to our assistance, and we were taken out of the carriage, without having been at all hurt. The night was dark and wet, but I had scarce touched the ground when I was lifted suddenly from it by Sir Clement Willoughby, who begged permission to assist me, though he did not wait to have it granted, but carried me in his arms back to Ranelagh. He very earnestly inquired if I was not hurt by the accident. I assured him I was perfectly safe and free from injury, and desired he would leave me, and return to the rest of the party, for I was very uneasy to know whether they had been equally fortunate. He told me he was happy in being honoured with my commands, and would joyfully execute them, but insisted upon first conducting me to a warm room, as I had not wholly escaped being wet. He did not regard my objections, but made me follow him to an apartment, where we found an excellent fire, and some company waiting for carriages. I readily accepted a seat, and then begged he would go. And go indeed he did, but he returned in a moment, telling me that the rain was more violent than ever, and that he had sent his servants to offer their assistance, and acquaint the Mirvans of my situation. I was very mad that he would not go himself, but as my acquaintance with him was so very slight, I did not think proper to urge him contrary to his inclination. Well, he drew a chair close to mine, and after again inquiring how I did, said, in a low voice, "You will pardon me, Miss Anville, if the eagerness I feel to vindicate myself induces me to snatch this opportunity of making sincere acknowledgments for the impertinence with which I tormented you at the last ridotto. I can assure you, Madam, I have been a true and sorrowful penitent ever since. But shall I tell you honestly what encouraged me to—" He stopped, but I said nothing, for I thought instantly of the conversation Miss Mirvan had overheard, and supposed he was going to tell me himself what part Lord Orville had borne in it, and really I did not wish to hear it repeated. Indeed, the rest of his speech convinces me that such was his intention, with what view I know not, except to make a merit of his defending me. "And yet," he continued, "my excuse may only expose my own credulity, and want of judgment and penetration. I will therefore merely beseech your pardon, and hope that some future time—" Just then the door was opened by Sir Clement's servant, and I had the pleasure of seeing the Captain, Mrs. and Miss Mirvan enter the room. "Oh ho!" cried the former, "you have got a good warm berth here, but we shall beat up your quarters. Here, Lucy, Moll, come to the fire, and dry your trumpery. But heyday, why, where's old Madame French?" "Good God!" cried I, "is not Madame Duval then with you?" "With me? No, thank God." I was very uneasy to know what might have become of her, and if they would have suffered me, I should have gone in search of her myself; but all the servants were dispatched to find her, and the Captain said we might be very sure her French beau would take care of her. We waited some time without any tidings, and were soon the only party in the room. My uneasiness increased so much that Sir Clement now made a voluntary offer of seeking her. However, the same moment that he opened the door with this design, she presented herself at it, attended by Monsieur Du Bois. "I was this instant, Madam," said he, "coming to see for you." You are mighty good.